Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. I don't want to take much of your time. I just want to have a brief introduction about today's event. As I mentioned in our class last week and previously about examining business continuity cases, this is one of the cases that I always wanted to bring to your attention and have someone talking about that. And the best person who can talk about this very successful experience is Ashley. I'm glad to have him here with us tonight. And if you remember, we were talking about business resiliency last week. I started talking about business resiliency. It was a year ago that one of the newspapers approached me and asked questions about Chapman Ice Cream Company and the way that they successfully managed disaster recovery after the fire that happened there. And I told them after the questions that this is going to be one of the case studies that we will examine that in our classes for the future as a successful case. And to examine that, really, it's probably best if we have someone with first-hand close experience involved in right from the beginning to the end and continuing after that with us. I imagine, and we don't expect Ashley to be the expert in business continuity, let's say, but he is one of the people who has done it in practice and has lots of experiences, lessons to share with us. So that's the reason we have him tonight with us. And the only difference between two types of business continuity problems is that in some cases we have some internal disasters where a business itself is subject to a particular hazard or emergency. And there are also other cases where we also deal with them where there are external hazards impacting not only one business but also all other businesses in an environment or in an area. This case was one of the first cases where a business individually was impacted. So there is a difference between when one business is impacted and when all businesses or the whole community is impacted. So we are looking at a case study where an individual business impacted by an internal emergency and the way that they continue their business after that. So I stop here and I welcome again Ashley for being with us. Thank you. I know you spent 2 hours in driving to come to here and really appreciate that. Thank you.
One thing, I don't know how to make this go onto the big screen.
I will do that.
Okay. Once upon a time I was tech savvy. Those days are gone. Hello, everybody. My name is Ashley Chapman. I'm the Vice President of Chapman's Ice Cream. It's a family business. How do I switch? Ooh. That one? Perfect. All right. Thank you. So this is 1973. Chapman's Ice Cream. It was actually a creamery before my parents bought it. Back in those days, getting a license to produce dairy was damn near impossible. So this story, as my father told it, he was working at St. Clair Dairy in Toronto, and he walked into his boss's office one day, and there's an older gentleman he never met before who was lamenting about this horrible money pit up in a tiny rural town called Markdale, Ontario. And where the hell was he going to find somebody stupid enough to buy it? Well, my father looked at him and said, well, I actually think I'm stupid enough. So within a few months, my parents had bought it off the older gentleman, moved up to the middle of nowhere. At those days, it really was the middle of nowhere. And yeah, they made a hell of a go at it. When I was born, I spent the first year of my life above the ice cream factory. That's where we lived. The first thing my parents built was the ice cream factory process on the inside. The second thing My father built was a shooting range actually above the ice cream factory, and all the police in the area would come over and use that because it was way more sophisticated than anything that they had at that time. So that's how my father got known as the crazy Englishman who lives on top of the ice cream factory. So over many years, my parents had worked very hard to build up this business. Right now, we are the largest by volume ice cream maker in Canada. Our two main competitors are Unilever and Nestle. Unilever does like Breyers products, and of course we all know Nestle. But we have fought as kind of the David with the Goliath ice cream company since the very beginning, and somehow, remarkably, it's paid off. When you have that fierce competition on that kind of tiny level that my parents did, it's just remarkable what they've done. When they bought the creamery, they started with 6 employees. After the first day, they fired 4 of those. My mother would take the orders, go down and help my father make the ice cream. It would get to a certain stage where my father would load it into the truck, hop in the truck, and start delivering around the area. And my mother would finish the process, go back up to the office and check the ancient 8-track voicemail that they had at that point, and that's how the process would work. Quite remarkable, really. So this is in 1985. You can see here, this is the original building. My parents built this on, which was their mix-making center, where they had 10,000 liter tanks for their ingredients. This was the engine room, and this was the start of the cold storage here. Now, this couple who lived in this house, thankfully, were deaf and very old, so they didn't really mind the fact that there was a factory right behind them. This is 1989. Again, my parents had built on a little bit more freezer space at that point. Everybody in town said, "What the hell is that crazy Englishman doing again?" No, they're never going to fill that up. Wow. We expanded again, and of course, all of these photos that I have are reclaimed from different aerial photography places, personal people's photo albums over the years, because literally we lost 100% of everything in the fire. So this is pretty much the last picture we have of the factory as close as it was to when it burnt down. And actually, if you still go on Google Maps, down to Street View, you can tour around the outside of the factory that is no longer there. The most important thing about this slide is that right here, on this corner of the building right there, that is where the fire started. Just to tie back to my other point, all those people that said my father was crazy for building that gigantic freezer, well, then he built one down the highway. And then he built again. That's 150,000 square feet, pretty much length of 3 football fields. And yes, it is luckily still there. That was one of the saving graces and the foresight that my parents had, because they really could have built this on, bought a small chunk of land with a couple of houses on it, right by the factory, in order to connect our main factory with the cold storage. Luckily enough, they didn't do that. They weren't really into dealing with the municipality, so they're a very hard municipality to deal with in order for us to buy those 2 houses and take over some town property. So in the end, they said, screw it, we're going to do it down the highway, and this is about a 5-minute drive from the main production area. Now, September 4th, 2009, that was the day it all happened. Actually, it was it was one hell of a day, as you can imagine. Every morning, as a management team in our company, we all sit down at 9 o'clock. This is HR, production managers, the assistant production manager, R&D, QA, you name it. All top-level execs would still meet at 9 o'clock, and we usually go to 10 to 10:30. We get everybody in the room, we plan out the day's events, and we go at it. Well, the fire started a few minutes past 10 o'clock, and I was leaving the boardroom early that morning because my father and I were taking his car to the mechanics. And he was on his way back to pick me up so we could shuttle the cars back and forth. I walked out of the boardroom, and I heard this alarm, and I never heard the fire alarm before. And there was this one entrance near mix making, and we had to rig an alarm to it because the employees, in a shortcut to get to the smoking area, would slide through there. And we certainly didn't want that, so we alarmed it. So it was constantly going off. That's what I thought it was. Not for a second did I think it was the fire alarm. So I went downstairs. I entered out of the front right here, which we had actually just built, and that was my office right above there. I was very proud of it. I designed it myself. It was beautiful. I walked out to the front area, about to hop in my car, and I just see a thin trail of smoke coming from behind the building. Obviously, the first thing I did is I grabbed my phone, called my father, who was on his way, told him not to stop to pick up some stuff for Mom as he was going to, and to get here right away. Ran around to the end of the building, and I didn't think it was a big deal. The fire literally was in a panel, and it looked about this big. You could just see this distortion in the dairy grade insulating panel that was on that end of the factory. And what had happened is on that corner I showed you earlier, we were preparing for a very large expansion. We were adding a gigantic, huge, one of the biggest in North America spiral tunnels, which is a freezing system that freezes ice cream incredibly fast, like 10% the time it takes with static freezing if you just throw it in the freezer. We were just getting started. Our contractor, John, possibly one of the best welders we have ever seen. He's been involved in every single construction project since 1989. This guy is a whirlwind. He can fix anything. He is the best site manager you've ever seen on any construction site. And he was the one up in the bucket welding a bracket onto the side of this steel beam. Now, these panels that we had are obviously fire rated, but what he didn't see is a single spark fell down in between to the very base and somehow contacted the very corner of it. It's standard procedure when you're welding up on high to have 2 buckets of water and 2 fire extinguishers. As soon as he saw smoke coming out, he dumped both buckets, put both extinguishers into the hole, backed off, and started raising alarms. Called the fire department. Now, it's actually, let me just back up here for a second. I'm going to show you where the fire department is. So this is where the fire started. That's the fire department right there. Unfortunately, being where we are, it is a volunteer fire department, and so on average it takes 20 minutes for them to assemble and get in gear and get the trucks rolling, which is considerably too long for what we were doing. But again, I was standing there with my father, the VP of operations. We're like, when are the goddamn trucks going to get here? We got to get back to making ice cream. Well, it spread from that little place on the corner all the way across the building until internally it had gotten to our old cold storage, which was built in, I think it was 1989. And of course, the entire thing was goddamn built of wood. So at this point, it was as good as newspaper. It caught, and boom, the entire roof pretty much erupted. At this point, the fire department had called in 2 other fire departments, one in Flesherton, from Flesherton, which is about a 10-minute drive, and one from Meaford, which is about a 15-minute drive. So within about 45 minutes to an hour of the fire starting, we had 3 fire departments on hand. Unbeknownst to us, through crooked municipal councils over the years, they had shaved money off the water tower project in the early 80s. Building the water tower to smaller specifications than was at the time mandated by the MOE. You had to have a certain amount, certain size of water tank. You had to have it. You had to supply everybody as well as have fire suppression water for all the houses in Markdale. Well, if one of the subdivisions in Markdale, a town of 1,600 people, had caught fire, they probably would have ran out of water. So about 3 hours into the fire, the water tower ran dry. The wells were cranked up to maximum capacity in order to replenish the water in the water tank. Well, they, of course, were undersized and under-budgeted as well, so they certainly could not keep up. And actually, at one point in the fire department had it under control. We would have saved something. Then we ran out of water. One of my high school buddies is on the fire department and is a trainer, so the day of, this street, I had jumped into my mother's car, he had as well, and we had loaded up this flotation device from the fire department to drive down to the pond, which is just within a rock's throw of the plant. We got the unit in, the truck backed up, we couldn't get the pumps working to pump out of the pond. Finally, one of our mechanics ran down, managed to jerry-rig it so it would work, and supplied that truck with water. But unfortunately, it wasn't enough. They had run 2 fire hoses to fight the fire from this one truck, because you might as well not have even tried to pump from the fire hydrants. The fire lasted pretty much all day. Of course, we thought we had it under control when it engulfed the cold storage as well as the dry warehouse. We had thought we got that part under control. Unfortunately, then we ran out of water. Then mix making. In mix making, there was a 30,000 liter tank of glucose. There was a 25,000 liter tank of chocolate. And just in case you don't know, you get that stuff burning, it does not go out. In fact, the one sugar tank was burning, I'd say, 6 days after the fire. And this is constant dousing of water by the fire department. So at this point, I was relegated to do nothing but stand there with my parents, who had put everything, heart and soul, blood and sweat, everything into this business as we watched it go up. And what makes this case unusual as far as fire disasters for industry is literally we lost everything. My father lost all of his immigration documents, so obviously that was one hell of a pain in the ass afterwards. We lost all of our pictures, we lost all of our awards, we lost all of our certificates, we lost our complete and total history. The IT manager at the time of the fire was on vacation. Now, ever since the late 80s, we have had a very basic IT procedure, which is every night my mother would get her backup tape and she would take it home. In '98, when we hired this IT manager, he convinced my mother that that was not her responsibility. That was his responsibility. So, of course, she gives it to him. Nothing happens. Everything's fine. Day of the fire, he was on vacation at a softball tournament, and he had left our complete archive of backups in his office sitting on his desk. His excuse at that point was that he was changing the format of the discs, but, well, we're smart people in my family, and we're not that stupid. He got lazy, stopped taking them home, and he left them in a corner on his desk. So literally, we lost everything, our sales history, everything. And at that point, to try and kind of wrap your head around that loss, it's damn near impossible. As you can see, the smoke cloud was absolutely insane. People were seeing it as far as an hour, hour and a half away. It was really quite intense, to say the least. And there's actually me, my father, and I think my mother at this point is right there. So the fire lasted until, well, the majority of the fire, before we realized that everything was gone, lasted until about 4 o'clock. Finally, we got my mother off the scene. She was obviously a mess, and my father and I stuck around to about 6:30. At that point, I was interviewed by a local news station that was on the outskirts as I was walking towards my car, because we had to move all the cars 2 blocks away from the scene. As I was walking to my car, I got kind of jumped by this reporter saying, "What the hell are you guys going to do?" And I told them there, because my parents and I are very close. We are very similar. We are of one mind about most things. Not everything, especially my mother, but most things. And I told him we were going to rebuild. He kind of looked at me like I had two heads and, oh, okay, yeah, sure, maybe you got hit by something in a fire. Shortly after this, we sent out text messages to all the executive team. We all met at my parents' house, and we started planning. September 4th, by the way, was a Friday, and it was a long weekend. So we started making calls. I got on the phone and the internet at my parents' place, which has a dial-up internet connection, and we found furniture suppliers. We called Staples. We called just about everybody you could possibly think to set up an office. And we all planned for Tuesday. People worked around the clock that entire first weekend in order to change our dry warehouse, our off-site dry warehouse that we had just built, into offices. Because remember, we have that cold storage down the highway, which had about $12 to $14 million worth of product alone. So at least we had something to sell. So come Tuesday morning, we walk into the dry warehouse, and essentially what we've done is we've set, instead of the skid positions that you have, we set them all up as offices. Here's an aerial view, the same aerial photography where I got some of their archived photos, and this is the day after the fire. As you can see, a little bit of the building is intact on this side. This was the newest side. But the core, the heart of our ice cream factory, of our business, was in fact right here. This was where my mother's office, the executive offices were, and my mother is incredibly anal about her files. She's been working on these things literally since '73. Within a series of file cabinets around her desk, she could tell you anything about the business. If you said, how much dairy did you use in 1989? She'd be like, there it is. We lost everything. We lost all of that. We lost all of our human resource files. We lost everything. So the Tuesday morning after the fire, not that we weren't there all week, this is just a picture of the, just a month and a bit later, not much left. There's our DC center, and one of the first things we did is we ordered hard hats for the children on the front on the highway. And then there we go. This is our dry warehouse that Tuesday morning. What we had done is we cleared out the skid positions. We had put them all up high. We had set cardboard around each one. We got the party rental company, because of course the furniture supply company from Toronto was going to be a few days assembling the order. And literally we set up the crappiest wooden tables you've ever seen and chairs, and we built our factory in this little warehouse. This is the Tuesday as well, and yeah, it's hard for me to look at when you have your entire life. It still shocks me that it can affect me this much afterwards. Oh, just give me a second. So we made it very clear on this day that we were going to support our employees. My parents were very thoughtful over the years, and they had hired into business interruption insurance and paid an absolute remarkable amount of money over the years for this insurance. In the end, it ended up being worth its weight in gold. At this meeting, we had a town hall style where we brought all of our employees in. The business interruption insurance would cover our salaried employees for 1 year, our hourly employees for 3 months. At this point, because we didn't know how long it would be before we were back into business, we assured our employees that regardless of our insurance policy, we would be paying absolutely every one of them through every minute that they could not have a job. Our focus was to rebuild the factory, rebuild our business, and to do that without your employees is exponentially harder. We had to make a strong front at this meeting to show everybody that we could lead them out of this and begin again. There they all are. At the time of the fire, we had 350 employees. This was in September. The ice cream season actually ends August 1st. That is when we start winding down, we start laying off our seasonal employees, and we start trimming the fat because obviously the winter is the slow time for ice cream. So here's a picture of the ladies. This is the this was the telemarketing area. This is the receptionist. This is the transportation department. And coming from a department that had over 150 maps of Ontario, we went to that. So a little bit more low-tech than what we had before, to say the least. My father's birthday is September 10th. So, yeah, can you talk about timing? And there's my father and my mother. My mother very happy with the candles. So at this point, we had to get out of the warehouse. We had a couple of options. We could either build a manufacturing plant, a temporary one, either in the warehouse of the pictures I just showed you, our dry warehouse, or this building. This was the old Nordic Furniture Factory. It had been abandoned for about 3-4 years at this point. We took a look at both buildings, but for obvious reasons, because this was originally a 45-year-old building on the front, about a 25-year building in the middle, and around an 8-year building in the back. So consulting with the CFIA, their choice was to do it in our dry warehouse. So we got to work. We removed all the push bar racking that literally we had finished putting up 2 weeks before. We had moved everybody out and into this building, essentially into this. This was your average workstation in the warehouse at the Nordic Furniture Factory. And we started working on our dry warehouse. Now, obviously, because it's a dry warehouse, it didn't have any drains. And as a dairy manufacturer, you really need a lot of drains everywhere. So we cut up concrete. Our plumbers were in first. We ripped everything out. We put everything in. We divided the room into two in order for us to pick a section that we could work on little bit by little bit. If it's a rectangle, this building, we started here, and we want to move in, move in, move in the different stages of our plan at that point. In the grocery stores, the highest valued piece of real estate is frozen. It's the least amount of space in any grocery store anywhere in the entire world, really. And to lose that space is a death sentence to a company like us. So we knew we had to get going. We had to get going quickly. So we sent our VP of Operations and our head maintenance manager, Murray, who had been with the company, I think, since 1982 at that point. We sent them down to Florida because miraculously in our mail the next week after the fire, we got a card talking about the closing of an ice cream factory in southern Florida. We sent our two guys down. They went with a big old sack of money and they bought absolutely every goddamn thing that they could. We loaded her up, sent her up through the border, and about a week and a half after the fire, we actually had ice cream making equipment. Now, there were a few things that we salvaged from the fire, most of which were tanks, stainless steel tanks. There's about 8 of them that we pulled out, and each one of these cost probably about $150,000, so at the time we were ecstatic. Unfortunately, we did not know this at the time, but there is no way to take out smoke from stainless steel. You can sandblast it, you can glass blast it, you can shoot it to the moon if you want, but it's not going to take that smell out of the stainless steel. And you cannot manufacture dairy in a tank that smells of smoke. Dairy is very susceptible to all flavors, just about everything. So we had to scrap those. Actually, one of them we gave to the party rental company, and they set it up as a waste tank or something like that, but most of it was taken to the scrapyard. Just to give you some sort of idea of the scale of what we sent to the dump, we had $1.5 million worth of metal scrap removed from the site. Everything that we have, absolutely everything we have, was stainless steel. And even burnt and twisted, it can still be melted down and it's still very, very, very profitable. So that was something at least. So we moved into this little warehouse and we got going. My father called in every favor of every ice cream maker he's known over the last 40 odd years. We called down to the Chicago Dairy Show, which is one of the biggest in the world. He called his contacts there. They put hold signs on every single floor model of all the freezers, the big freezer centers that we needed. Within 7 weeks, from September 4th, we were making ice cream again. One thing about Nordic that we had to do is obviously we walked into an empty warehouse. So the first thing we did was we called this WSI Rentals and we got trailers. And we started cramming the trailers for different departments so we could be covered. People could have confidential spaces to do HR, payroll, accounts receivable, accounts payable, everything that you could think. This is the main run, which is our telemarketing center. There's our accounts receivable, ladies. That's our payroll trailer. And we decided, okay, before we even started making ice cream in our temporary facility, we need to make something. So we started reaching out to all the small dairies. Actually, well, that's not true. We reached out to the two big guys first, asking if they could make minor little things for us. And they both sent us letters saying, let us know anything we can do to help you, as long as it doesn't involve manufacturing ice cream, or giving us money, or advice, or anything. But essentially, it was a go fuck yourself from the big boys. But that's fine, so be it. My parents started off the company spitting in their face, so we're okay with that. And it was funny. Some of our executives, a couple of our executives used to work at Nestle. And the Nestle headquarters in Ontario, in Toronto, I think it's in Toronto. Yeah, the Unilever one's over London way. They had an emergency meeting where they had to sit down with all their top execs and talk about Chapman's ice cream and how they would work us out of our market position, and just speculating and bringing everybody together to think, when will Chapman's be back? Because they knew that we had said we would be back, but whatever. 24 months, that was their best guess. They figured we would produce our first carton of ice cream 24 months later. Well, they can stick that up their ass because we did it in 7 weeks. Another thing that we had to do, because time constraints for commissioning and setting up a line is just absolutely unbelievable how much goes into setting up an ice cream line. So we reached out to little guys, Stony Creek Dairy. There was Reed's Dairy, Shaw's Ice Cream, very nice ladies who own that, and Tracy's Dairy. Now we segmented our products. We had our purchasing department send packaging, ingredients, all split up to these small dairies. Then we arranged shuttle buses. We took our employees, we put them up in hotels. We brought everything we could in to suit them up, bump caps, boots, uniforms, you name it. And we sent them to these faraway places, and our employees actually worked 5 days a week in these foreign ice cream factories. And let me tell you, before the fire, we were the largest by volume ice cream manufacturer in the country. So when you go from everything state-of-the-art to some of the systems that they had there, oh my God. So one example I like to use is our sandwich line, the little rectangular sandwiches like this. In our factory, we had 6 people running that line. At Stony Creek, we had 16. No conveyors, no automation, just a freezer, a machine, depositing packaging in by hand. And we suddenly realized why we hadn't even been touched in the industry for many, many years. The little guys run up to just an incredible amount of obstacles. But we couldn't thank these people enough more, because right off the bat, we started replenishing our inventory. And in fact, throughout the entire thing, there were some product lines that were never absent from the store shelves, which is the best possible scenario that you could get. That is the first 2-liter to come off the line in our temporary manufacturing plant in our dry warehouse in Markdale. And of course, that is my mother, and I'm obviously giddy. Because even though we were making those products with our people, our ingredients, our packaging, and Ontario Dairy even, it wasn't the same. It really did not have the same quality. We had perfected our freezing processes, we had perfected our mix making, which was batch pasteurization. They don't do that anymore. The regulations on batch pasteurization, you go back to them, they're around 1955, 1960. That's the most updated version that you can get. Unfortunately, when we built the new plant, we had to succumb to the CFIA and regulatory bodies, and we had to buy an HTST system. But we worked around it. What my father developed was a batch pasteurization and HTST hybrid. So we got all of the benefits from our HTST system, which is very quick and very efficient, and yet we had the holding times to let ingredients hydrate. Because in ice cream, it's all about hydration. You get powders in there, stabilizers, things like that, skim milk powder, bring your solids down, and it needs to hydrate. In the HTST system, within a few minutes you got your mix and it's pumped out to your line. Some people even cook their mix in the HTST system longer to make it caramelized, but I hate that stuff. That's a drier's trick from the States. Here is some of the ladies in the temporary facility. This is the second line that we made. Actually, one thing I should say about the last photo. That square 2-liter is the exact same as when my parents started in 1973. That is the product that they made way back then. So our first concern was for our Mario-Matic system. One hadn't been built since 1983. It's an obsolete piece of technology that people don't work anymore. You build anymore, people don't use anymore, except for us, because my parents had modified this over the years to work better than anybody could have